Last week we spoke a bit about Mendel Hurwitz. He was a teenager in Israel. It was already a few weeks ago. He committed suicide, and in his suicide note, he said goodbye to all his friends, and he said, "We'll meet when Mashiach comes, when Messiah comes." And this was quite a famous story in the Chabad circles and in the Orthodox circles. He committed suicide because he was being bullied in schools. And there was an interview where they interviewed some of his classmates, and they truly horrible things that happened while he was in school. So it was severe bullying, including things like entire class segregating him so they couldn't eat with the class on school trips. They would sing songs to annoy him, like around him, without letting him escape. Really shocking things. So he went from school to school. He was actually harassed in more than one place, and he committed suicide. And the person interviewing some of his classmates afterwards said that, to me, anyone that bullied him in school is like his murderer. I blame them for the suicide, and they're the murderer. And last time I was here, I said I disagree with that sentiment, and I got some backlash. So I wanted to speak a bit about this issue, and it's a shame that some people aren't here because they afterwards told me that they have their own opinions, very strong opinions on the topic, and I would have loved to hear, a conflicting view, someone who argues with me. But I'd like to present my case. I'd like to discuss not just if that sentiment is right, how culpable are they? So there is a certain level of seriousness to bullying, because if it leads to suicide, it makes it worse. So I want to discuss a bit. So how bad is it? I don't want to say it's not a problem at all, and also why I think it's dangerous and why I think it's wrong to have such a attitude or a perspective where we'll try to blame or consider them murderers or overdo the damage, the harm. Why that's bad? What's so bad about that? In the first Talmudic source that comes to mind in a case like this is a Talmud that says it's better to throw yourself in a fire and be burnt alive than to embarrass someone in public. Embarrassing someone in public is called in Hebrew to make someone's face white. Talmud says the blood moves in the face, changes the color of the face. So it's like murder, because the blood is a person's life. Yeah, Adam hu nefesh. The blood is the soul. Blood, when blood stops, that's the life stops when the blood circulating stops. So we consider that someone's life, and therefore, moving the blood from someone's face, that's a symptom or sign that you're kind of killing him. So it's a kind of quasi-killing. Rabbi Yonah goes as far as to equate it to a derivative of murder. So something like avak or avak or abizrai, later we find this term, that embarrassing someone in public is the equivalent to quasi-murder, right? Now, you've got some later rabbis that get into a discussion about this. Talmud says someone who embarrasses someone in public, it's like he's shofech damim, it's like he's killing people, like he's shofech damim. Some people went as far as to say, so maybe this has got the rules of murder. So if, let's say, someone says, either embarrass someone in public or I'll kill you, you should give up your life to not embarrass someone. So Talmud says that you should throw yourself in a pit of fire. And this goes as far as to say that I've seen some responsums where there's a discussion, could you violate Shabbat to stop someone from being embarrassed in public, or to not embarrass someone in public, and these kind of things, which is a crazy overstretch of the simple reading of the Talmud. And to be fair, to be clear, no rabbis actually take it that far, but it's a discussion amongst rabbinic literature. Comes to mind is Rabbi Shlomo Salman Auerbach was a responsum of the similar. We have a lot of responsums about Kohanim. If a Kohen embarrasses someone in public, can he then duchen? Because if someone kills someone, a Kohen that kills someone can't bless the Jews because he's killed someone. So if somebody embarrasses someone in public, can he no longer bless people because bless the Jews? Yes. So there's a discussion about the extent to which someone is considered a murderer. Could you do the Kohen blessing for embarrassing someone in public? Now, all this conversation is not talking about a suicide. It's just about the fact that you've embarrassed him in public. So that itself is bad enough to the extent that it's a quasi-murder. Whether or not he commits suicide is irrelevant for this Talmudic principle. On the Talmud, you've got people like the Meiri who comment this was only hyperbole. You're not actually considered a murderer. So you've got the Menachem, Meiri, and other people who don't take this Talmud too seriously. There are some people who do take it seriously, and it varies, right? This Talmud varies. Now, Rabbeinu Yonah points out that there's something very tragic about the Talmud saying that you embarrass someone in public, it's like you've spilled blood, right? And a lot of people point out, why is it in plural, like the Ben Ish Chai? Rabbeinu Yonah says, in a way, embarrassing someone in public, in a way, for the aggressor, in a way it's worse than actually killing someone. When someone kills someone, they immediately see the dead body in front of them, and they're very taken aback, and they want to repent. When someone embarrasses someone in public, he walks away. He doesn't see the damage, because the damage is internal. And for the rest of his life, you've affected someone negatively, and the person that's committed it doesn't feel the guilt. And that lack of feeling guilt, in a way, is worse than an actual murder where you do feel the guilt. The Ben Ish Chai, the rabbi from Baghdad, he points out that we say it's as if he killed people, shofech damim in plural. Someone who embarrasses someone in public, as if he killed many people. Why doesn't it say kilu shofech damo, his blood? He didn't kill many people, right? So the Ben Ish Chai and other people also have mentioned this, but a lot of people quote the Ben Ish Chai on this. On his commentary in the Talmud, he mentions this argument that when you embarrass someone in public, you aren't just killing him that one time. For the rest of his life, every time he's in contact with people, with his circles, people are always going to think of him with that embarrassing moment that you've created. So for the rest of his life, every time he's with those people, it's like he's being killed again. It's like this embarrassment, which is a quasi-murder, happens constantly throughout his life. There's a book, the Birkat Simcha, where he makes the argument that the reason it's like murder is not just because that moment you've embarrassed him, but for the rest of his life, he won't do his full potential. He'll be more depressed. He'll have a lower self-esteem. For the rest of his life, he'll be a less functioning person, and you've killed that potential for the rest of his life. So it's not just the right now embarrassment, but it's a long-term effect that kilu shofech damo. It's as if you've killed the person. I want to introduce my own theory as to why it says as if he killed people in plural and not in singular. But as it relates to murder, I want to still stay on topic. None of this means that you've killed him. All this means is that you've embarrassed someone in public, and the embarrassment itself is a quasi-murder. But the fact that it's considered like a murderer, first of all, I'd like to discuss the statistical probabilities of bullying resulting in suicide. And if, let's say, it's unlikely that any random individual would commit suicide, I'd like to speak to the definition of evaluating this act of murder. Because if you throw a knife in the air and it's going to kill someone at random, you don't know who it's going to kill, but there's a probability of, let's say, 10% it's going to kill someone, is that a murderer? I'd also like to speak about the definite killing when it's unintentional, for example, by the coronavirus. There were discussions about these things. So it's not just probability, it's the intent, it's the act. There are a lot of technical halachic details that go in. And the third one, which I think is the most important, is if there's someone else involved, there's another player involved. Let's say the person that takes his own life, right? He's another person involved in the equation here. Could you be considered a murderer if someone else was involved? Let's say hire a hitman and things like that. And there are so many elements. Also, is his life considered at risk when there's a suicide attempt? So I'll give an example. Rabbi Amar was a chief rabbi in Israel, and he had a case about attorneys. You have a lot of attorneys that are government, sponsored attorneys. So if I can't defend myself in court, government will sponsor an attorney, and the attorney is going to defend for me in my court. Now, some people have committed certain crimes or accused of committing certain crimes. They can't afford a lawyer, and the government is going to help them out by presenting them the legal defense. And these people are very worried. Often they're falsely accused, and the family is very worried. And very often this high-level anxiety can result in very dangerous diseases, even to the level where certain people can commit suicide or develop a disease of which they die. Now, he said Rabbi Amar says that the government hasn't, at the time at least, it didn't have a statistical probability or evaluation based on other countries or the such. But he said it's fair to assume you're saving lives by having this government-defended attorney operating on Shabbat also. However, he said, just because people's lives are being saved, that does not make it pikuach nefesh. Does not mean that you can violate Shabbat to save someone's life. The fact that there's a statistical probability of saving lives doesn't mean you're doing an act of saving lives. Pikuach nefesh, saving someone's life, doesn't mean that the net life level is going to be higher at the end of the activity. So there's a lot of, for example, if people go to university on Shabbat, they'll get out of university earlier, they'll be doctors earlier, more lives are going to be saved by that. That does not mean you can go to university on Shabbat. There are many examples where there are more net lives being saved. That does not mean the act violating Shabbat is an act of saving lives. So it's a very important distinction to be made. So for all these reasons, and every single topic I'm mentioning now is a whole topic for itself. So therefore, whether or not this is an actual act of murder halachically would be a stretch, and I don't want to get into all these technicalities. But what I do want to speak about is the culpability of the embarrassing someone in public and the bullying and why it is so bad. And then I'll address why it's important to recognize that it's not murder.
Something that you're making.
Okay, let's say it's not. Let's say I'm wrong.
They're killing their bullies.
Rabbi, right? Recently I saw a response about a Kohen. He goes and kills someone who's infected with COVID and walking around the streets. And he says maybe this person can still do the Birkat Kohanim because he killed a Rodef.
Yeah, exactly.
This person is a murderer, an active murderer, walking around with COVID vaccine, with COVID, being infected. So by killing him, you're essentially killing a murderer. I don't know. I'm not a rabbi to start getting into every topic that comes up from this issue. To me, these are long stretches. I don't think someone with the COVID, with corona, is considered a murderer. And if you kill him, you are a murderer, and you should not do the Birkat Kohanim. That's my personal opinion on this. I don't know if I have to go through all the arguments in a class now to address this. But to me, a person who is bullied that then goes and does a school shooting, even if he's only shooting bullies, to refer to those bullies as murderers, in my mind, there are so many qualifications, which I mentioned in this class already, which have to be filled, and I don't think they are. I don't think any of those are. Even if you'll argue one of them is, I think there's a very long stretch. Now you're making a good point, which is that when students are bullied, it's not just suicide; it's also school shootings and other forms of pikuach nefesh that arouse, and these are also worth taking into consideration. But today I'm speaking specifically on the suicide, where students are bullied and then they commit suicide. So I'm going to go with a study about the LGBTQ teens because it's exactly half of them that get bullied, which makes it very convenient. Well, it's not convenient that they get bullied, but it makes it very convenient to calculate the suicide risk. 10% of those that are not bullied end up attempting suicide, and 25% of those that are bullied end up attempting suicide. So it's 15% rise amongst those that are bullied to attempt suicide, because 10 of those anyways would be attempting suicide, whether or not they were being bullied. So suppose you have a school with 200 kids who are LGBTQ. Out of those, 100 are bullied, 100 are not bullied. Of the 100 that are bullied, 10 of them would be attempting suicide even if they weren't bullied, right? So 15 students out of every 100 bullied LGBTQ students end up attempting suicide because they are being bullied. Now, attempting suicide doesn't really mean that they end up, committing suicide. I believe amongst teens or high school students, it's 1 in 25. So it's a very high percentage of those that don't actually end up committing suicide. Although a lot of them, these are attempts. So a lot of them do end up attempting more than once. Let's just go for now with the attempted suicide rate, because whether someone ends up dying or not, the fact they're attempting suicide is definitely bad enough. So you've got whenever you bully someone, let's just go with this number, which the study with LGBTQ students. When you bully someone, there's a 15% chance this person is going to commit suicide because you bullied him, right? And let's just pretend like you're the only person bullying him, so no other bullies. So you'll take full responsibility for your actions, right? Would it then be fair to say that because you're bullying him, you're a murderer? Would you say you're a 15% murderer? How would you equate this person's? Yes, I see objections already.
It's just impossible. I don't see
if I've got a bomb,
say this is where
I understand. But if you've got a bomb and the bomb has a 15% chance of blowing up and killing someone, if I throw it through someone's window and it does blow up,
fine, the probability stands.
Right. So why with a person is it different? Different people are different. I bully someone.
But it's a bomb. Yeah.
But yes, being teased or being harassed is also not nice. But it's not the same as being bullied. No, the fact that 50% of LGBTQ students are bullied is truly horrifying.
Bullying could easily be teasing.
No, so there are criteria. Recently on the headline, which is it's an Orthodox podcast for Halacha, they had a woman on to speak, because of Mendel Hurwitz, they had a woman on to speak about bullying. And what makes something bullying, what makes something teasing. I'd like to respond to the point you were making, which is that they have a choice, right? Whether or not they have a choice is up for speculation and rabbinic dispute, whether or not they have a choice to commit suicide or not, right? And I don't want to get into that conversation because I don't know. I don't know what goes on in the mind of someone who attempts suicide, right? I'll assume you're right. I'll assume they had a choice and their choice was that it makes more sense for me to commit suicide. If I make someone's life so miserable that he will choose to commit suicide, should I not be culpable for that? Even if you're right. Someone chose to commit suicide. If I made their life so miserable that it's better for them to be dead, shouldn't I be responsible for their death?
Sorry, you're asking.
I'm asking, let's say you're right. Let's say they didn't have a choice. I'm not going to debate that. It's a rabbinic discourse. We can get into a different time. Whether or not they have a choice. Yeah, so the intent part, I agree. It's technically not murder without intent. It would still be a cause of death. It would still be a very big problem, right? You made another point.
It's a massive one.
You made another point, which is that it's his choice ultimately. So therefore, I'm not responsible. He's responsible, right? Now I'm asking you, let's say you're right. Let's say he did have a choice, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're right. He did have a choice. If I made someone's life so miserable that he's better off being dead, isn't what I did just as bad as killing him? Okay. So in the laws of Lashon Hara, I mentioned we're going to mention Lashon Hara already. The laws of Lashon Hara, there are 3 people who are affected by Lashon Hara when you speak bad about someone, right? Who are the 3 people? Anyone knows?
The speaker.
The speaker, the person
speaker, and anyone else who hears it.
the person spoken of, and the people hearing, right? The people hearing, what did they do? The person speaking, he did something bad. The person spoken of, people think bad of him. The person listening, how does it impact him badly? What did he do that's wrong? So the Chafetz Chaim says something very interesting. It's about incentives. A person cannot tell Lashon Hara without someone listening. Right? If I want to tell Lashon Hara, there needs to be a recipient to the person that I'm speaking about, he's not interested in listening. Somebody wants to speak Lashon Hara, there is someone I have to tell it to. People tell Lashon Hara, they want to tell it to someone. By you listening to the Lashon Hara, you've created an incentive for him to keep looking for Lashon Hara and to speak Lashon Hara, for people to listen to Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara game is alive because of the listener. Yeah. So therefore, in a sense, anyone that listens is complicit in Lashon Hara and destroying the person's life because they're creating the incentive for Lashon Hara by listening, by future Lashon Haras. And Lashon Hara is a game that spirals. You say Lashon Hara now, he says Lashon Hara, and it ends up destroying many people's lives because it's a virus that mutates. I would argue the same applies to bullying. When one person wants to bully another student, it's not just that people need to stand up against it. By people not participating, not laughing at a joke, not being there, a bully can't bully. It's just one individual guy. It's the mutual participation in the bullying that makes it so bad. So in essence, when you've got the 15%, in the court we say a judge will always be with many judges. That way, if they get something wrong, they can split up the loss amongst many judges, right? So if you've got a classroom of 30 kids, right, the bully is obviously more responsible than the other kids, but everyone else that was there laughing or even not protesting or not leaving, just being there, they're equally partial. And I would argue that's what it means, that someone who embarrasses someone in public, it's as if he's spilled many bloods, not just one blood. He's not just killing the person you're bullying now. It's a virus that mutates. So the next person bullied is because you've created the incentive for bullying. You've made it fun, you've made it easy to bully by you participating in this one. So the next student is going to be bullied is also responsible. By embarrassing someone in public and not shutting it down, you're essentially killing not just one person, all other people who are bullied. Now, if you want to start saying, okay, well, so then the people bullied and everyone else in the classroom is murderers, right? So, for example, I saw Rabbi Hornstein. I don't know who that was, but he wrote something about how we're all responsible for every suicide for not being aware about about the mental health issues, right? Which I think is a crazy overstatement. And you can't possibly blame rabbis for suicides because they're not preaching about mental health, right? So this is where I would like to finish my class and why I argue with the sentiment. Let's say the whole class is responsible for the death. What about the teachers? Right? Oh, yeah, the teachers are also responsible because they should have stepped up. What about the parents for sending the kid to that school? Right? So at a certain point, you've stepped, and if you'll say, okay, even them, then I'll ask, okay, what about me? I'm in a different school, but I didn't stand up for bullying in the school I was in, right? Then people bully, and the virus mutates, so essentially I'm responsible in that suicide also. And then I'd like to and if even over there you'll concede, so I'd like to mention my final straw, which is the victim himself is responsible for not standing up to the bullies for other people who are bullied, right? So at a certain point you have to say this is ridiculous, right? And I think it's very dangerous to try and exaggerate and put more people in the murdering camp. We should just try to be honest about how horrible bullying is and how it does lead to suicide without having to demonize the bullies and saying that they're murderers and therefore if you kill them it's okay and things like that. I don't know if anyone remembers, I generally try to avoid politics when I speak. Don't know how many people over here remember Charlie Kirk's suicide, right? Now, I remember a while back before that, there was a suicide.
Charlie Kirk.
Not suicide, assassination.
Yeah.
Yeah. A while before that, there was an assassination in some healthcare CEO, an insurance company. And I said that and people were saying he's a horrible person and he killed many people, so he's essentially a murderer. So therefore, his death is not so sad, and things along those lines. And then I argued that even if you're right about this person, by demonizing people like that, you're overdoing the damage. And then what happened is that they assassinated someone outside an Israeli embassy. They assassinated, also actually on the left wing, there was a politician assassinated, and then Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And then people went out and said, well, he's essentially a murderer. And they attributed crazy arguments to make him into a murderer. I think by making people murderers, even if they're bad people, by going as far as to say that they're murderers, like someone without a COVID vaccine is a murderer, somebody who bullies is a murderer, it essentially makes it easier to act cruelly to them and have the vicious cycle go on. Right? So if you want to make horrible things stop, the solution isn't to demonize bad people. Often the way dictatorships erupt is by over making a problem which isn't such a problem, and then saying, I'm going to take care of this problem, and then using excessive force to punish the bad people. So I think it's very important to not overreact to things which are truly actually bad. With that, I'll conclude, and I would like to hear the rebuttals from